Mr.ShroomCaster. When I was 10, I lived in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where front doors were rarely locked and every neighbor knew your name. It was the 90s, and my parents often told me I was lucky to grow up in such a safe community. But even then, something darker lingered beneath the surface of that idyllic image. For months, whispers of missing children had rippled through the town. It started with a boy from the next school district over, Jason something. I didn't know him, but my mom showed me his picture in the paper. Then it was a girl named Lucy from a neighboring town, whose backpack had been found abandoned in the woods. The stories sent chills through the adults, though they tried to keep their fears hidden. But kids talk. On the playground, the rumors ran wild. That Lucy had been taken by a ghost van. That Jason's disappearance was part of some cult. My best friend, Megan, swore she saw the van once, parked near the park, and said it had no license plates. I didn't know what to believe. I'd never seen anything suspicious. Our neighborhood felt quiet and ordinary, until it didn't. That day was like any other at first. School had let out, and I walked home alone like I always did. It was a short walk, just 5 blocks from the red brick elementary school to our little 2-story house on Maple Street. My mom worked part-time at the diner, and my dad was away for a business trip, so I knew the house would be empty until dinner time. The autumn air was crisp, and the sidewalks were scattered with leaves that crunched under my sneakers. I had my favorite blue backpack slung over one shoulder, and I was humming a song I'd heard on the radio. The neighborhood was its usual quiet self. The sound of distant lawnmowers, the faint barking of a dog, the hum of a passing car. But something felt different that day. Subtly, like an itch I couldn't scratch. It wasn't until later that I realized I'd seen fewer people than usual. No kids on bikes, no moms pushing strollers. Just me, the empty streets, and the sound of my own footsteps. About halfway home, I passed the corner of Elm and 3rd, where an older kid had gone missing the year before. Tommy Baker. He'd been 12, 2 grades ahead of me, and just vanished one afternoon after riding his bike to the corner store. I remembered the flyers with his face plastered on every pole and shop window. I'd seen his mom crying on the news, begging for answers. Tommy was never found. I hurried past the corner without meaning to. My pace quickened, my breath puffing in little clouds in the chilly air. I told myself I was being silly, that I'd walked this way 100 times and nothing bad had ever happened to me. Then I saw it, the white van. It was parked at the end of the next block, just sitting there. The engine wasn't running, and the windows were tinted, so I couldn't see inside. My first thought was that it was a work van. Plenty of people in town had those for their plumbing or painting businesses. But something about it unsettled me. Maybe it was the way it blended in too perfectly with the quiet street, like it was trying not to be noticed. I slowed down, my heart thudding in my chest. I debated crossing the street, but the thought of drawing attention to myself made me freeze. So, I walked past as casually as I could, my eyes flicking to the van for just a second. No movement, no sound, just the faint creak of a tree branch swaying in the wind. I thought I was overreacting. I was just a kid, and kids have wild imaginations, right? I told myself to stop thinking about Tommy or the ghost stories Megan told at recess. It was just a van. But as I rounded the corner to the next street, I heard the faint rumble of an engine starting. My stomach dropped. The van had been silent before, and now it was moving. Slowly, deliberately, turning onto the same street I was walking down. It was following me. The rumble of the van's engine made my pulse race. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it wasn't following me. Maybe they were just driving home, or heading to a job. But my legs started moving faster on their own, like my body knew what my mind wasn't ready to admit. As I reached the corner of my street, the van crept closer, slowing down as it pulled alongside me. The driver's window was cracked open, and I caught a glimpse of the man behind the wheel, a thin, pale face with scruffy hair under a baseball cap. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the wheel. It wasn't until I heard the woman's voice that I stopped walking. "Hey there, sweetie," she called out, leaning out of the passenger side window. Her voice was sugary and cheerful, like a kindergarten teacher trying to coax a shy kid to join the group. "You're Sarah, right? Your mom sent us to get you. She had a little accident." Her words hit me like a cold slap. My mom? An accident? My stomach churned with fear, but some part of me, a part one didn't even know existed, refused to believe her. Something about the way she smiled felt off, too big, too fake, like she was forcing it. I stopped dead in my tracks and stared at her. She was probably in her late 30s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and sunglasses perched on her head even though it was cloudy. She wore a pink sweater and had a clipboard on her lap. She looked ordinary, but that only made her more terrifying. "What happened to my mom?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though my voice cracked. The woman didn't hesitate. "Oh, she's okay. Don't worry," she said with a smile that made my skin crawl. "She just hurt her leg and couldn't come to get you. She asked us to take you to her. She's waiting at the doctor's office right now." The man behind the wheel said nothing. He kept staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. I could see the way his hands gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled and tense, like he was ready to spring into action at any second. I glanced down the street toward my house. I could see it from where I was standing, just 2 blocks away. The van's engine idled softly, its sound blending with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, unsure of what to do. "You're such a brave girl," the woman continued, her tone syrupy sweet. "Your mom's worried sick about you. She said you'd be such a big helper if you came with us. We can get you there faster than walking, you know?" She pointed toward the sliding door of the van, as if that would make it more inviting. I noticed the inside was dark, the windows heavily tinted. I couldn't see much, but I spotted a blanket and a few cardboard boxes in the back. It didn't look like the kind of van someone would take to a doctor's office. Something deep inside me, an instinct I didn't even know I had, kicked in. "If my mom's hurt," I said, taking a step back, "why didn't she call Mrs. Thompson?" Mrs. Thompson was our neighbor. She lived 2 houses down from us and always helped my mom when she needed a ride or someone to watch me. If my mom was in trouble, she would have called her, not strangers. The woman's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, honey," she said with a nervous laugh, "your mom told us Mrs. Thompson wasn't home. That's why she called us instead." Her tone was light, but I caught the sharpness in her eyes, a flicker of frustration at my hesitation. She gestured toward the van again. "Come on, sweetheart. We're wasting time. Your mom's waiting for you." My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I barely heard her. I wasn't stupid. I knew my mom would never send strangers to pick me up, let alone a creepy man and this overly friendly woman. Every nerve in my body screamed that I needed to get away. I took another step back. "I'll walk," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm almost home." The woman's smile disappeared entirely. "Don't be silly," she snapped, her voice losing its warmth. "Get in the van. Now." That's when the man turned his head for the first time. His dark, sunken eyes locked onto mine, and the look he gave me sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't say anything, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened even more, like he was waiting for a signal. Without another word, I turned and bolted down the sidewalk, running as fast as my legs could carry me. "Hey!" the woman shouted behind me, her voice sharp and angry now. "Come back here." I didn't look back. I didn't care what they said or did. My only thought was to get home, to get to safety before they could catch me. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs feeling like they might give out. Behind me, the van's engine roared louder, getting closer with every second. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear the tires crunching over leaves and gravel, the sound too close for comfort. "Stop running!" the woman's voice rang out, sharp and angry. She wasn't pretending anymore. She wanted me to stop, and I knew if I did, I'd never make it home. The van swerved closer to the curb and slowed down. I heard the passenger door creak open. Then, footsteps. Heavy, fast footsteps. She was chasing me. I pushed myself harder, my chest aching as I zigzagged off the sidewalk and onto someone's lawn. "Help!" I screamed, the word barely escaping my dry throat. My voice cracked, but I kept shouting, "Help me!" Then I heard a voice, deep and loud, cutting through the chaos. "Hey, what's going on?" I glanced toward the sound and saw a man standing near the curb with a rake in his hand. He was looking right at us, his face a mix of confusion and anger. Relief surged through me, but I didn't slow down. The woman stopped chasing me. "It's fine," she yelled toward him, her voice suddenly sweet again. "She's with us." The man wasn't buying it. He stepped closer, his voice rising. "Doesn't look fine. Leave her alone. I'm calling the cops." I stopped running and turned, gasping for breath as I watched her freeze. She looked toward the van, then back at the man, who had already pulled out his phone. The driver leaned out the window and shouted, "Get back in the car. Now." She hesitated for a second, then turned and ran back to the van. The door slammed shut, and the van sped off with a screech of tires. The man ran over to me as the van disappeared around the corner. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice firm but kind. I nodded, but I couldn't get any words out. My chest heaved, and my legs felt like they might collapse. He crouched slightly to meet my eyes. Do you know them? I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. They said my mom sent them, I choked out, but she didn't. He put his hand on my shoulder. You're safe now, he said firmly. Come with me. We'll call the police. I followed him toward his house, still shaking. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see the van coming back, but it was gone. When we got inside, the man grabbed his phone and dialed the police, his voice steady as he explained what had just happened. I stood in the hallway, still trembling, clutching the straps of my backpack like they could anchor me to the moment. After hanging up, he turned to me. What's your mom's number? We should let her know you're okay. I stammered out the number, and he punched it into his phone. It only took a couple of rings before she picked up. Hello? I heard her voice on speakerphone, and the familiar sound made my tears start flowing again. Ma'am, my name is Tom, and I live a few streets over. Your daughter's with me. She's safe, he said. There was an incident with the van. Some people tried to approach her, but I scared them off. The police are on their way. I heard my mom gasp on the other end, her voice breaking. Oh my God. Is she hurt? Sarah, are you okay? I'm fine, Mom, I managed to say, my voice shaky but audible. I'm okay now. I'll be there as soon as I can, she said, and I could hear the panic and relief tangled in her words. Tom nodded at me, his face kind but serious. You did good, kid, he said quietly. Your mom's on her way, and we'll make sure those people never come near you again. It felt like hours, but within minutes, a car screeched to a halt outside. I was sitting in Tom's living room, a blanket over my shoulders, trying to calm my racing heart. When I heard my mom shouting my name, I bolted to the door. She was running toward me, her face pale and tear-streaked. I collapsed into her arms, and she held me so tightly it hurt. You're safe, she kept repeating, her voice trembling. You're safe. Before long, 2 police cars arrived, their lights flashing. 2 officers approached, and one crouched slightly in front of me. He didn't waste time, asking short, clear questions. Do you know the people in the van? No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've never seen them. Can you describe them? Anything you remember? A man and a woman. The man was driving. He had messy dark hair. The woman blonde. She chased me. Good. What about the van? It was white, with dark windows. I didn't see the license plate. The officer nodded, scribbling notes quickly before looking at my mom. She did great. We'll follow up on this. While they spoke briefly with Tom to confirm his account, I stayed glued to my mom's side. The fear wasn't gone, but knowing she was there and the police were involved made me feel like maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was over. As the officer finished taking my statement, he turned to my mom, his expression serious but steady. Ma'am, we're already working on this. We've had similar reports of a van matching this description in nearby towns. A man and a woman, same kind of approach. My mom's grip on my shoulder tightened. So, you know who they are? We're piecing it together, the officer said. We've got a few leads, but nothing solid yet. Every detail helps, though, and your daughter's account could make a big difference. Her voice shook as she spoke. How soon can you stop them? What if they come back? We're doing everything we can, he assured her. We've got patrols in the area, and we're sharing information with other departments. These people are careful, but we're going to catch them. My mom nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't say anything more, but I could tell from her face she wouldn't rest until they were caught. Neither would I. I'm 28 now, and not a week goes by when I don't think about that day. My town is quieter these days, a place I hardly recognize when I visit. But the memories of that white van, the woman's fake smile, and the pounding of my own heart still feel as vivid as if it happened yesterday. What makes it bearable is knowing that my case was the last. Just a few months after my encounter, the police caught the people in the van. They were a couple, in their late 30s, who had been targeting small towns like ours across the state. Their names aren't important, but what they were doing was something out of a nightmare. They were abducting children, selling them into trafficking rings in other states. The thought of what they planned to do to me still makes my stomach turn. The police found evidence in the van, a notebook with names, pictures of kids, and a list of places they'd scouted. My name wasn't in there, but they believed my case was spontaneous, a crime of opportunity they decided to act on when they saw me walking alone. Their arrest was a relief, but it didn't erase the fear they left behind. I remember reading about the trial in the local paper. The woman cried in court, saying she'd been manipulated by her partner, but it didn't matter. They were both sentenced to life in prison. I wasn't there for the sentencing, but I didn't need to be. By then, I'd learned enough to know I never wanted to see their faces again. The scars from that day aren't visible, but they're there. I still don't like walking alone, even in broad daylight. The sound of a van idling too close sends my heart racing. And whenever I see kids walking by themselves, I feel an almost overwhelming urge to stop and make sure they're safe. But I also learned something about myself that day. How important it is to trust your instincts. That small, inexplicable voice in the back of my mind, telling me to run, to scream, to keep going, saved my life. And it's a lesson I've carried with me ever since. Some days, I think about how close I came to disappearing forever. How different my life could have been if I'd hesitated for just a moment. That fear doesn't go away, but neither does the gratitude. For Tom, the man who saved me. For my mom, who always knew how to keep me safe. And for the police, who didn't stop until those people were caught. This story isn't just something I tell to warn others. It's a part of me. A reminder that life can change in an instant, but also that strength and a little help from others can make all the difference.